My name is Rowan Hargrove. I'm 33 years old and I hold a degree in business administration with a specialization in corporate restructuring. For as long as I can remember, I've been told that my role was to support the advisor, the balanced one, the older brother who didn't need to shine to have value. I worked quietly within the Hargrove and Westwood family group, helping with critical areas, solving crises, preparing reports that others signed. I never cared about the credit, only about the results. But the price of being reliable is often being forgotten. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, I learned early that being a Hargrove came with expectations. My father, Richard Hargrove, built the company from a small investment firm into a diversified holding group worth over $300 million. Properties in Manhattan, stakes in tech startups, a luxury hotel chain across the Northeast. The Hargrove name meant something, but legacy also meant hierarchy. And in our family, hierarchy was never about competence. It was about presence. My younger brother, Cole, 30 years old, was everything my parents wanted in a successor. Charismatic, photogenic, always ready with a firm handshake and a confident smile. He attended galas, posed for business magazine covers, gave interviews about the future of family enterprises. He looked like a leader. I preferred spreadsheets to spotlights. While Cole networked at charity auctions in the Hamptons, I was reviewing acquisition contracts at 2 in the morning. While he gave motivational speeches, I was restructuring underperforming divisions to keep them profitable. Our grandmother, Eleanora Hargrove, was the only one who seemed to notice the difference. She founded the company alongside my grandfather in 1978, back when it was just a single office in Stamford. Even in her 80s, her mind remained sharp as a blade. "Rowan," she told me once during a quiet afternoon at her estate in Bedford, "people confuse performance with substance. Your brother performs. You produce. Never forget which one actually matters." I smiled politely, assuming it was just grandmother's wisdom. I had no idea she was preparing something far more concrete than advice. 3 years ago, in early 2022, I started noticing a pattern. Every major strategic decision was being funneled directly to Cole, regardless of whether he had the technical expertise to handle it. And every time, within weeks, I'd get a panicked call from my father or the CFO. "Rowan, we need you to take a look at this. Just help us smooth out some details." I never complained. I'd step in, fix the structural problems, renegotiate terms, ensure compliance with SEC regulations, and hand it back. Cole would present the final version to the board, accept congratulations, and move on to the next photo opportunity. My name rarely appeared in the reports. When it did, it was buried in footnotes as additional consulting or technical advisory support. My grandmother saw it all. During one of our regular lunches at her favorite restaurant in Greenwich, she brought it up directly. "They're setting you up to be erased," she said, cutting into her veal piccata with precision. "You understand that, don't you?" I shrugged. "I'm fine with working behind the scenes, Grandma. Someone has to actually make sure things run properly." "That's noble," she replied, her blue eyes fixed on mine. "It's also foolish. You think your father will remember your contributions when it's time to hand over control? He'll remember what he sees, and what he sees is Cole shaking hands and giving speeches." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "You document everything," she said quietly. "Every project you touch, every crisis you solve, every decision that originated from your analysis. You create a record that can't be ignored or rewritten." I followed her advice. I started keeping detailed records, emails with timestamps, original drafts of strategic proposals, meeting notes, financial models with my signature embedded in the metadata. I organized everything chronologically in a secure cloud storage system, backed up in 3 separate locations. I didn't know why I was doing it, I just trusted her instinct. Then 6 months ago, in March 2025, my grandmother passed away. Congestive heart failure. Peacefully in her sleep at 87. The funeral was held at a historic church in Greenwich, attended by business leaders, politicians, and family friends from 5 decades of networking. Cole gave the eulogy. He spoke beautifully about her vision, her strength, her legacy. I stood in the back, silent. 3 weeks later, in early April, the board convened for the official succession meeting. My father had been planning this transition for years, the moment when he'd step back from day-to-day operations and hand the reins to the next generation. The conference room on the 42nd floor of our headquarters in Midtown Manhattan was filled with board members, senior executives, and the family attorney. My mother sat beside my father. Cole sat across from me, his expression calm and confident. My father stood, adjusted his tie, and began. "Today marks a significant moment for Hargrove and Westwood," he said, his voice steady and formal. "After considerable thought and planning, I'm announcing that Cole Hargrove will assume the role of president and CEO, effective immediately. Additionally, he will be the sole beneficiary of the family trust established by my mother, Eleanora Hargrove, totaling $50 million. Applause began. Cole smiled graciously, nodding to the board members who congratulated him. Nobody looked at me. My name wasn't mentioned once. I sat there, hands folded on the table, feeling like a piece of furniture. A lifetime of invisible dedication officially dismissed as technical support. Then, just as my father was about to continue, our family attorney, Margaret Sutton, raised her hand. "Richard," she said firmly, "before we proceed, there's a matter that requires the board's immediate attention." The room fell silent. My father frowned, clearly caught off guard. "Margaret, we discussed the succession plan thoroughly. What matter?" Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder with a blue cover. 3 weeks before her passing, Mrs. Eleanora Hargrove executed an addendum to her trust documents. This addendum specifically addresses the distribution of the $50 million family trust and the operational control of Hargrove and Westwood. Cole's smile faded slightly. My father's face went pale. "That's impossible," my father said. "I reviewed her estate plan myself just 2 months ago. There was no addendum." "She worked with me privately," Margaret replied, her tone professional but unyielding. "The document was executed in my office in late February, witnessed by 2 independent attorneys, notarized and filed with the trust administrator. It supersedes any prior verbal or informal arrangements." She opened the folder and began reading. "Per the explicit instructions of Eleanora Hargrove, the beneficiary of the family trust and the controlling interest in Hargrove and Westwood shall be Rowan Hargrove, effective immediately upon her death." The silence was absolute. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. I didn't move, I barely breathed. My father stood abruptly. "That can't be right. Cole was always intended to—" "Mr. Hargrove," Margaret interrupted calmly, "your mother was exceptionally clear in her reasoning. She included a supporting document detailing her decision. With the board's permission, I'll read the relevant sections." Nobody objected. Nobody could. Margaret pulled out another document, this one filled with my grandmother's distinctive handwriting alongside typed annotations. Mrs. Hargrove writes, "Over the past 5 years, I have carefully observed the operational contributions of both my grandsons. While Cole has served admirably as a public representative of our family name, the substantive strategic and financial leadership has consistently originated from Rowan." She continued reading, and with each line I felt the atmosphere in the room shift. In 2021, when our Boston commercial portfolio faced potential default due to mismanaged lease negotiations, it was Rowan who restructured the terms and secured an extension, preventing an $8 million loss. Cole was credited in the board report. Rowan's name appeared nowhere. I remembered that project. 6 weeks in Boston, meeting with property managers, renegotiating with tenants, analyzing cash flow projections. Cole showed up for the final signing ceremony and shook hands with the press. In 2022, when our proposed merger with Pacific Logistics Group nearly collapsed due to incomplete due diligence, Rowan identified critical liabilities in their pension obligations that our initial assessment missed. His intervention saved the company from assuming $42 million in unfunded liabilities. The merger was successfully restructured. Cole presented the final deal to the board. Rowan received a thank you email. Margaret kept reading. Project after project. Crisis after crisis. Every single one followed the same pattern. I did the work. Cole took the credit. The board members looked uncomfortable. Some stared at the table. Others glanced between Cole and me, as if seeing us clearly for the first time. My father tried to interject. My mother was elderly. She may not have fully understood. Mr. Hargrove, Margaret said sharply, your mother was 87 years old and sharper than most people half her age. She spent 6 months compiling this documentation. She reviewed financial records, emails, meeting minutes, and project files. Every claim in this document is supported by evidence. She held up the folder. It was at least 3 inches thick. She also included testimony from department heads, including your CFO, your general counsel, and 3 senior vice presidents, all of whom confirmed under oath that Rowan has been the primary strategic architect behind the company's most critical decisions over the past 5 years. Margaret turned to a marked page. Mrs. Hargrove's conclusion reads as follows. I leave the control of Hargrove and Westwood and the family trust to Rowan, not out of favoritism, but out of necessity. A company built on competence cannot be led by charisma alone. Cole has potential, but he has not earned this responsibility. Rowan has earned it 100 times over, in silence and without recognition. It is time that silence is broken. She closed the folder and looked directly at my father. The trust documents are legally binding. The transition is effective as of today's date. Any challenge to this addendum would require proving mental incompetence or undue influence, both of which would be nearly impossible given the documentation and witness testimony Mrs. Hargrove provided. My father sat down heavily. He looked older suddenly, like the weight of his mistake had aged him in seconds. Cole said nothing. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight. One of the board members, Thomas Whitfield, a veteran investor who'd known my grandmother for 30 years, spoke up. Richard, I think we all need to acknowledge what's in front of us. Eleonora didn't make impulsive decisions. If she went to these lengths, we owe it to her memory to honor her judgment. Another board member nodded, then another. My father looked at me for the first time since the meeting began. His expression was complicated. Surprise, confusion, maybe even shame. Rowan, he said quietly, did you know about this? No, I replied honestly. I had no idea. It was the truth. My grandmother had never told me about the addendum. She'd only told me to document my work. She'd prepared everything in silence, just like she'd taught me to operate. Margaret handed me a copy of the trust documents. Mr. Hargrove, as of this moment, you hold controlling interest in Hargrove and Westwood and full access to the family trust. The board will need to formally acknowledge the transition, but legally, the authority is yours. I looked down at the document. My name, typed clearly at the top. Beneficiary, controller. For 33 years, I'd been told my role was to support, to stay in the background, to let others shine. And now, with a single document, my grandmother had rewritten the entire narrative. I looked up at the board. I accept the responsibility, I said calmly. And I intend to lead this company the same way I've always worked, with precision, accountability, and results. Thomas Whitfield smiled slightly. That's exactly what Eleonora would have wanted to hear. The meeting adjourned shortly after. There were procedural details to handle, legal filings to complete, announcements to prepare, but the decision was final. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Cole approached me. His face was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Congratulations, he said. His voice was flat. Cole, I started. No, really, he interrupted. Grandma made her choice. Guess I always thought. I don't know what I thought. He walked away before I could respond. My father lingered near the door. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded once and left. I stood alone in the conference room, holding the document that had changed everything. The first week after the succession announcement was chaos, but controlled chaos, the kind I'd spent years learning to manage. Word spread quickly through our industry. The business press picked up the story within 48 hours. Hargrove, heir apparent, replaced in surprise trust decision, read the headline in the Wall Street Journal. Several journalists reached out for interviews. I declined all of them. I had no interest in explaining or justifying what had happened. The documentation spoke for itself. My first action as controlling shareholder was to call a meeting with the senior executive team. Not the board, not my father. Just the people who actually ran the day-to-day operations. We met in a smaller conference room on the 38th floor. No formal presentations, just a straightforward conversation. I'm not here to tear anything down, I told them, but I am here to establish clarity. From now on, decisions will be made based on data, strategic alignment, and measurable outcomes, not on politics, relationships, or optics. Jennifer Rodriguez, our CFO, spoke up first. Rowan, I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're relieved. We've been watching competent work get credited to the wrong people for years. It's been frustrating. Others nodded in agreement. I appreciate that, I said. But I don't want this to turn into a witch hunt against Cole or anyone else. He wasn't malicious. He just wasn't ready. The responsibility for that falls on my father, not on him. David Park, our general counsel, leaned forward. What's your plan for Cole? I'm going to offer him a choice, I replied. He can stay in a role that matches his actual skills, something in business development or investor relations, where his networking abilities are genuinely valuable. Or he can leave with a generous severance and pursue something else, but he won't have operational authority anymore. The room was quiet for a moment. That's fair, Jennifer said finally. More than fair, honestly. Over the next 2 weeks, I restructured our governance model. I established clear reporting lines, implemented quarterly performance reviews tied to specific metrics, and created a new internal audit system to ensure accountability at every level. Cole chose to leave. He came to my office in late April, 3 weeks after the succession meeting, looking tired, but more composed. I'm resigning, he said simply, handing me a typed letter. I read it quickly. Standard corporate language. Professional. No bitterness. Where are you going? I asked. I don't know yet, he admitted. Maybe I'll try something outside the family business, something where I can build my own reputation instead of inheriting one. I nodded. I think that's smart. He hesitated, then said, I'm sorry, Rowan, for taking credit, for not seeing what you were doing. I genuinely didn't realize. I know, I interrupted gently. You believed what everyone told you. That's not entirely your fault. Still, he said, you deserved better. After he left, I sat in my office and thought about what my grandmother had written. She hadn't done this out of spite. She'd done it out of necessity. She understood that competence, left unrecognized, eventually becomes invisible. And invisible competence can't lead. The $50 million trust gave me options I'd never had before. I could have spent it on myself, a penthouse in Tribeca, a vacation home in Aspen. The kind of displays of wealth that our social circle expected. Instead, I created the Rowan Hargrove Foundation. The foundation's mission was simple. Identify and support mid-level professionals in family businesses and corporate environments who demonstrated exceptional competence but lacked recognition or advancement opportunities due to internal politics. We offered executive coaching, leadership development programs, and direct financial support for professionals looking to transition into their own ventures. The foundation also provided legal resources for people dealing with workplace credit theft or systematic marginalization. I hired Margaret Sutton to serve on the foundation's board. She understood better than anyone why it mattered. Your grandmother would be proud, Margaret told me during our first board meeting at the foundation's office in Stamford in June 2025. She always said the quietest people in the room were usually the ones holding everything together. The foundation launched in July, 6 months after I took control of Hargrove and Westwood. We funded our first cohort of 20 professionals, representing industries from finance to manufacturing to healthcare. Each one had been systematically overlooked despite clear evidence of competence. Within a year, 12 of them had been promoted. 5 had started their own companies. 3 had successfully negotiated significant raises and equity stakes. Meanwhile, Hargrove and Westwood stabilized under my leadership. I didn't make dramatic changes. I just formalized the work I'd already been doing for years. We expanded our commercial real estate portfolio into emerging markets in North Carolina and Georgia. We divested underperforming hotel properties and reinvested in boutique luxury brands with better margins. Our revenue increased by 17% in the first year. Operating margins improved by 8%. Employee retention hit a 5-year high. The board noticed. Thomas Whitfield pulled me aside after a quarterly review meeting. "You've done in 12 months what we hoped would take 3 years. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing." My father and I maintained a cordial but distant relationship. He attended board meetings, offered occasional advice, but mostly stayed out of operations. He'd moved to their home in Naples, Florida. We had dinner once, in April 2026, exactly 1 year after the succession. He'd flown up to Connecticut for a family friend's funeral, and we met at a steakhouse in Greenwich. "I owe you an apology," he said, halfway through the meal. "I didn't see you clearly. I saw what I expected to see, not what was actually there." "I know," I said. "It's hard to see past expectations, especially with family." "Your grandmother saw it," he continued. "She tried to tell me, actually, multiple times. I thought she was being sentimental." "She was being precise," I corrected gently. "That's different." He nodded slowly. "You're doing well with the company, better than I did, honestly." It wasn't quite a full reconciliation, but it was something. Enough. Cole, meanwhile, had moved to Austin, Texas. He joined a startup accelerator program and was working with early-stage founders on pitch development and investor relations. From what I heard through mutual connections, he was good at it. He'd found a role that matched his actual strengths. He sent me an email on the foundation's 1-year anniversary. Saw the article in Forbes about the Eleanor Foundation. "It's exactly the kind of thing Grandma would have loved. Proud of you, brother." I wrote back, "Thanks. You're doing good work in Austin. Keep it up." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. We'd probably never be close, but we didn't need to be enemies. Looking back now, I realize my grandmother's gift wasn't just the money or the company. It was validation. She'd given me proof, documented and undeniable, that my work had value, that I had value. For years, I'd accepted invisibility as the cost of being competent. I told myself it didn't matter as long as the work got done. But it did matter. Recognition matters. Not for ego, for sustainability. You can't lead effectively if nobody knows you're leading. You can't build a legacy if your contributions are systematically erased. My grandmother understood that. She spent the final months of her life ensuring I wouldn't spend the rest of mine being invisible. She didn't give me power. She confirmed in writing what had already been true, that I'd been leading all along. The company just hadn't realized it yet. 2 years into my leadership in April 2027, exactly 2 years after the succession meeting, something unexpected happened. We received an acquisition offer. A private equity firm based in Boston, Cornerstone Capital Partners, approached us with a proposal to acquire a 40% stake in Hargrove and Westwood for $230 million. They'd been tracking our performance since the leadership transition and were impressed by our growth trajectory. I brought the offer to the board. The numbers were attractive, the terms were favorable, but I had reservations. "This isn't just about valuation," I told the board. "It's about control and direction. Private equity firms operate on exit timelines. They'll want aggressive growth, rapid scaling, and a sale within 5 to 7 years. That's not how this company was built." Thomas Whitfield agreed. "Your grandmother spent 50 years building this company with patience and precision. Selling a significant stake changes that fundamentally." But other board members saw opportunity. "Rowan, we could use that capital to expand aggressively. enter new markets, scale faster than we ever could organically. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I reviewed Cornerstone's portfolio, spoke with CEOs of companies they'd previously invested in, and analyzed their typical value creation strategies. Then I made my decision. We're declining the offer, I announced at the next board meeting. Not because it isn't financially attractive, but because it doesn't align with our long-term strategy. We're not building a company to sell. We're building a company to last. One board member challenged me. Rowan, that's leaving a significant amount of money on the table. Short-term money, I corrected, in exchange for long-term control. My grandmother didn't fight to keep this company independent just so I could sell pieces of it 2 years later. The board voted to support my decision. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. That decision cemented something important. It showed the board, the executive team, and the industry that I wasn't leading reactively. I was leading with intention and conviction. The foundation continued to grow. By the end of year 2, we'd supported over 80 professionals. The success stories kept coming. One of our early fellows, Patricia Williams, had spent 12 years as a senior analyst at a pharmaceutical company, consistently producing market research that drove billion-dollar drug development decisions. Her name never appeared on executive presentations. Her male colleagues regularly presented her work as their own. The foundation connected her with an executive coach, helped her document her contributions, and supported her transition to a competitor, where she was immediately hired as Vice President of Market Intelligence at nearly double her previous salary. She sent me a handwritten note 6 months later. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing, evidence of my own value. Thank you for seeing what my previous employer refused to see. Stories like that reminded me why the foundation mattered. Competence without recognition isn't just frustrating. It's a waste of human potential. 3 years after taking leadership, I was invited to speak at a family business conference in Chicago. The topic was succession planning and governance in multi-generational companies. I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my strength. But Margaret Sutton convinced me to accept. You have a story that needs to be told, she said. Not for your sake, for the thousands of competent people being systematically overlooked in family businesses across the country. The audience was about 300 people. Executives, board members, family business advisors. I kept my remarks straightforward and factual. I talked about the danger of confusing presence with performance. I discussed the importance of documentation and transparent evaluation systems. I shared my grandmother's insight that quiet competence, left unrecognized, eventually becomes invisible. I didn't name my brother. I didn't criticize my father. I just told the truth about what had happened and what I'd learned. The response surprised me. During the question and answer session, a woman in her 40s stood up. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. I've worked in my family's manufacturing business for 18 years, she said. I've led every major operational improvement we've implemented. My younger brother, who joined the company 5 years ago, was just named CEO. Everything you described, I've lived it. She paused, composing herself. What do I do? I thought carefully before responding. Start documenting everything, not with the goal of revenge or confrontation, but with the goal of creating an undeniable record. Then when the time is right, present that record to the people who need to see it, whether that's your board, your advisors, or your family. And if they still don't see your value, be prepared to go somewhere that will. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. After the conference, I received dozens of emails from attendees sharing similar stories. I forwarded every single one to the Foundation's intake team. Now, 4 years after that board meeting that changed everything, I can look at what we've built with genuine satisfaction. Hargrove and Westwood is stronger than it's ever been. Our revenue has grown steadily without sacrificing our values. Our employee satisfaction scores are the highest in company history. The Rowan Hargrove Foundation has supported over 200 professionals and counting. We've expanded our programs to include mentorship networks, leadership workshops, and advocacy resources for people facing systematic credit theft in their organizations. My relationship with my father has improved gradually. He's proud of what I've accomplished, even if it took him too long to see it. We'll never be as close as we might have been if things had been different, but we've found a respectful equilibrium. Cole is thriving in Austin. He recently launched his own consulting firm, helping startup founders refine their pitches and develop investor relationships. He's found his niche, and from what I hear, he's genuinely good at it. We exchange messages occasionally. It's cordial. It's enough. I think about my grandmother often. I wish she could have seen what became of her final gift, but in a way I think she knew. She understood that competence, once validated, has a way of building on itself. She didn't rescue me. She didn't hand me anything I hadn't already earned. She just made sure the truth couldn't be buried anymore. In the end, I didn't defeat my brother. I didn't punish my father. I simply took the space that had always been mine by merit, but which I'd been taught to let others occupy. My grandmother understood something fundamental. Leadership isn't about who speaks loudest or looks most confident. It's about who delivers results consistently, who solves problems when no one's watching, who builds systems that outlast individual personalities. For 33 years, I was told my role was to support others. It took my grandmother's final act to show me, and everyone else, that I'd been leading all along. The company just needed to catch up to reality, and now it has. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and turn on notifications to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.